that will be speaking soon. Frank Wu from CB2 and president of Court Square Civic Association. Amy Tsai, steering committee member of the Parent Action Committee. Kiki Valentine, a parent like me. And Farah Despignas, if I got it right, president of Bronx. President of CEC cannot read, so I apologize. Could you raise your hand? And okay, they put the small print in for someone my age. And of course, Wayne Devonish, 500 Men Making a Difference, somebody who is a Brooklyn and citywide activist. And I'm glad everybody is here today because we're here as parents and educators and because we know firsthand how COVID-19 pandemic and remote learning were a daily struggle for our children. As a parent of 2 young boys in our public schools, my family lived through these challenges. For over a year, these remote learning devices were the only link any of our children had to their classmates, their teachers, and their lessons. Their whole education was based on a remote learning device, and without it, there was no learning. Now, many of you know my family was fortunate. Elise and I had the resources to get our sons the devices they needed so that they were able to learn remotely. We were able to connect them to the hardest time of their young lives. And when their remote device broke, we were able to replace it because we had the financial resources, plain and simple. But too many families on the other side of the digital divide were left completely in the lurch, stranded by unreliable connectivity, unreliable devices, and an unreliable Department of Education. That's the people in the room. The DOE had one job during this pandemic: get every child the tools and resources to learn outside the classroom. That was their job. That was their one focus. A core part of that responsibility was putting functional remote learning devices into the hands of each and every student that needed one. Each and every student. Our office conducted an audit of the DOE's distribution of remote learning devices over the last year and a half. And here's what we found. The agency bungled the job. Simply put, they just weren't prepared. The DOE didn't have consistent procedures for distributing, tracking, and recalling remote learning devices across the system's 1,800 schools. And that means there were no clear mechanisms in place to ensure that students were receiving devices efficiently and equitably. 16,451 requests from students seeking remote learning devices in 2020 remained pending or unresolved as recently as of March of this year. 16,000. That's more than 16,000 students who were ignored by our education system. It's unacceptable. The DOE has no explanation why these requests were left unresolved for such an extended period of time, which is essentially a whole year of schooling. Meanwhile, as many as 16,000 kids' remote learning devices needs were simply ignored, and our audit found that at least 3,000 students got more than one device. 3,000. Now, the agency is still trying to reconcile request data, so these numbers could be even higher, and I personally believe they're going to be. All this points to clear lack of preparedness and coordination that left both the DOE and the city vulnerable to waste. The DOE spent $287 million for the 511,000 iPads and paid $4 million a month for the data plans for these devices. But if these devices aren't getting it to the kids that need them, then most of the students are left paying the price for years to come. The DOE needs to learn its lesson from the pandemic and have clear systems in place to get help and devices to every student that need them. And here are the core recommendations that they must adopt today. First, I demand that they identify every single child who didn't get a device when they needed it and make sure those children get the support and resources to address any learning loss they may have experienced as a result of the DOE failings. That has to happen. If there are children who simply did not get a device for a year and therefore essentially didn't attend school Shame on the DOE, shame on the chancellor, shame on the mayor. We've got to make this right before school starts in September. You know those kids, find those kids. Obviously, the DOE must immediately provide devices to eligible students whose requests are still pending or resolved. Seems pretty clear to me. You either have a device or you don't. I don't know what pending or unresolved means, except you're putting children at additional risk. We also need to establish one central tracking system to account for all devices issued to students. Now, for those of you who cover education, this is not new. We told the Department of Education back in 2014, long before the pandemic, when we issued our first audit of DOE's failure to properly account for its multi-million-dollar purchases of computer equipment. You know, we said to them, you don't have a system. You're not tracking the computers. We found computers in closets unused. So you need a tracking system. We didn't tell you this last year. We didn't tell you this 2 years ago. We told you this when I first became controller, that you weren't doing your job. And they didn't listen to us. So we need the DOE to listen. We need the DOE to develop and distribute detailed written policies and procedures to all schools governing the handling of students' requests for a device. And the DOE should ensure that the remaining devices that were shipped to students in error are returned or repurposed and put back as a way of distributing to kids who never got devices. Look, this really matters because the kids are coming back and we're concerned about them. There are new COVID restrictions. There's the damage that COVID caused them. Our most vulnerable kids, the youngest ones, can't get vaccinated, yes. If you don't think that our kids are struggling internally, then you're not listening to the kids, right? We as parents know this, right? We as parents know this. Their only link last year was this device to the people who cares about them the most, their teachers. And they could not reach out and touch anyone. But if we leave here today satisfied that it was okay for one child not to be on remote learning for the school year, then what the hell was DOE and this mayor doing during the pandemic, okay? You want to do something for the kids? On the way into the celebration concert, give them a damn iPad, okay? All right? Give them connectivity, you know, and let's get some bands that the kids like, you know, not people like me, right? Let's change this system. So I'm here today with people to talk directly about what it means to parent, what it means to advocate for kids, and people's real life experiences. And I want to start with Frank Wu from CB2. If Frank could come up and speak to these issues. Thank you. Good to see you.
Hi, my name is Frank Wu, and I'm the president of Court Square Civic Association in Long Island City, one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in New York City. Long Island City is in Western Queens and is not Hudson Yards, but we have disconnected neighborhoods with the lack of public green space and school capacity. Despite $60 million in allocated money, the School Construction Authority has still not been able to situate a new school in Long Island City since 2018, leading to distrust and cynicism. COVID exacerbated this distrust among families within our public school systems, and as a father of a 5-year-old and a supporter of our public schools, it's disheartening and hard to reconcile the inconsistent rollout DOE implemented, including now a very late vaccine mandate. Every single teacher needs to be supported, and every student and family in partnership. My hope is that today's audit, along with the new funding ratio from New York State, will enable DOE to improve as best as it can, and hopefully they remember the importance of not ensuring equity among the system, but also maintaining trust for all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Frank. By the way, before we hear from our next speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Deputy Controller for Audits and Investigations, Marjorie Landa, and her amazing staff who tracked DOE for the last 8 years and never, ever, ever gave up on the kids. And I really want to thank you today. And I'm sure, and I really just want to thank you and the whole team that's here. All right. Amy Side, Steering Committee member of Parents Action Committee. Please come up. Thank you, Amy.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Amy Tsai. I am a leader for the New Settlement Parent Action Committee. I'm also a CC member for Citywide Council for District 75, Students with Disabilities in this DOE. I'm also a parent of 5 New York City public schools, a resident of the Bronx, District 10. Prior to the pandemic, we've asked the mayor, we are in the 21st century. Every school system has a device to access the information that this worldwide has for education for our students. But New York City didn't have that, and this is prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was just the highlight that the relationship that only connected our students and our school community staff was this one device. And as I say, I serve the District 75 special needs community. A device is just not a device for special needs. It needs to be a device that's accessible, accommodate to their needs, and able to mobilize so students can use with their service providers, their SETS teachers, their multiple teachers in their school community. And again, for many months, while we were in the last school year, my district and all the districts in the Bronx was pleading for every student to get a device. And again, we had hundreds and thousands of students in the Bronx that didn't get an adequate device that either worked or wasn't connected to the internet. And I live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a strong connectivity, that didn't have a strong 5G connection within our schools, our neighborhoods, and access from our families. So I say, we need to make sure every student has a device to connect as we turn back to school, to have a relationship with their teachers, their staff members at their building, to really learn and thrive and learn what's outside of the Bronx and learn what's outside of the New York City. And I say this, that we need to make sure that the funding doesn't come from our principal's budget of the school, because that will take a lot of other instructional programming from the students if we use those funds from principals. So I asked the Department of Education that you need to have allocations from the central departments to allocate specifically these devices, from iPads, MacBooks, any equipment that belongs to the accessories of these devices, as well as Chromebooks with LTE component compatible, to make sure that they have access to the outside world, and also for the special needs community, their equipment that they need. And I just wanted to say that whatever investment there is, we need to make sure that every student and every school, regardless however this pandemic would go, is actually for the students and their future of success. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Could Kiki Valentine come up? Hi, and if you could just introduce yourself.
Hi there. My name is Kiki Valentine. I'm an advocate and a parent of a 7-year-old, an emerging second grader. First, I want to thank Mr. Stringer and his staff for inviting me to speak today, and I want to commend our school community, Brooklyn New School PS 146, which just had a visit from the Chancellor, as a model school of how to handle what has just transpired. With access to Wi-Fi still horrendous in too many parts of our boroughs, in my district, 15, besides getting our hands on physical devices in a timely manner, especially for the most marginalized students and families, one major issue of the digital divide was lacking effective means to support students with elderly or non-native English-speaking caregivers at home conducting the remote learning. I personally supported some of our NYCHA students and classmates in a makeshift outdoor classroom at Portside, New York in Red Hook, braving the cold and the rain, using my phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot to get these kids in their classrooms. Their parents and caregivers simply could not figure out Zoom and Google Classrooms, and there were zero resources in place to support them outside of parents and facilitators like me who were willing and able to provide that support. Public school faculty had to practically become tech gurus to help families, while too many students accumulated absences, missing out on critical education and community support during an extremely distressing and traumatic time. It's 2021. we can and should do better for our students. Thank you.
And could we call up Farah Despains to come up, Bronx Plan?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here, Controller Strenger. So my name is Farah Despain, and I'm the president of CEC 8 and the president of the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group. So I'm here to call on the DOE to stop perpetrating the tales of two cities when it comes to education. Because I remember when Mayor de Blasio asked for my vote, that he said the reason he was running was that he wanted to end the tales of two cities economically and in education. As a former DOE teacher myself, I took that to heart, and I can't begin to explain how disappointed that I have been, because in the Bronx, even when I was a teacher, our kids never had technology. And teachers used to, spend money out of their own pockets to bring technology to the classroom, however they could, refurbished stuff or however they could. And before the pandemic, we used to ask of the DOE to bring equity to education and equity to the technological divide. And obviously they didn't. And during the pandemic, our students in the Bronx suffered the most because we could not account for how many students didn't have devices. And when we asked questions, we didn't have answers because no one could answer. So it is imperative that the DOE not only track devices, but that they become transparent, that it is transparent to the parent leaders at the CEC level and at the President's Council level, so that we know who has what in our districts and who needs what. So I would say that the DOE has several problems, right? It has a problem in terms of transparency. It has a problem in terms of systems and structures in order to be able to do what it says it's going to do. And then it has a problem of listening, right? And it's a shame because the DOE doesn't listen to anyone. And I'm here to ask the question, if the DOE doesn't listen to parents, the DOE doesn't listen to students, the DOE doesn't listen to elected officials, the DOE doesn't listen to teachers, it doesn't listen to principals. DOE, who do you listen to? Or whom do you listen to? Who are you accountable to if you are not accountable to our students and you are not accountable to the parents who trust the education of their children to you? So beyond devices, the DOE needs to learn to become accountable to its clients, who are the children and the parents, because without the parents, you don't get the children. So the arrogance of the DOE in thinking that they can dismiss our children and dismiss the parents and dismiss the educational needs of the children, especially when it comes to technology, because somebody mentioned it very well just now. We are in the 21st century, right? Technology, education without technology is literally sealing the futures of children, because technology gives them access to things that the teachers cannot give on the spot, even in the classroom. Thank you.
You're the best. Thank you. Very well said. Last but not least, somebody who works with kids and students and is a real presence on so many of these issues, Wayne Devenish, 500 Men Making a Difference. Thank you for being here, Wayne.
So, good morning. My name is Wayne Devenish. I'm with 500 Men Making a Difference, and my group does after-school programs. So we're very familiar with working with the children in the Department of Education, and we really want to thank the Comptroller for putting time, energy, and resources, his amazing staff, behind doing this audit, because it brought something to light with proof of something we all suspected that was the case. So now we're going to be able to press this administration to do what it is supposed to do so that there's a level playing field for all of our children. And speaking on behalf of a citizen of the greatest city on earth, I want to thank the greatest comptroller on earth for keeping his mind and his energy on the task of supporting all of the students and all of the citizens of New York. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Wait, I didn't hear you. What did you say before that? Thank you, Wayne. Give Wayne a round of applause. Any questions from the press?
Hi, yes. We received our iPad at the height of the pandemic, and there were connectivity issues with the apps, and it wasn't like uploading. But I will say that tech support through our individual school. So the privilege extends district by district. Some schools in the lowest income communities don't have the bandwidth to be able to provide tech support. But I will say that tech support did step in and allow us to get connected. So that was something that was great. There was also a snafu. Do you remember, Scott, when they wanted to take Zoom away and we weren't allowed to use Zoom because of the Zoom bombing? That was a major issue for us. Our school kind of said, no way, we're going to stick with Zoom, but other different communities probably had issues with that as well.
Thank you. And by the way, just to remind the press, go back to 2014 and see our first audit, because that's when the problem started, and then you could see throughout this. And I anticipate that the DOE will say that everything's fixed, there's nothing to worry about, they took care of it. That's what they've said, Marjorie, on every single audit for the last 8 years, not to be nostalgia about it, but they're full of it. This is a broken system, and we got to fix it by September. Well, first of all, I think step one is listen to the experiences of these parents and educators. Second, look at the audit for real. You have a problem here, and it's a twofold problem. You have remote devices that are not getting into the hands of all the children. You have to own up to that. You have to own up to the technology, as you described, about the different technology experiences people have. That's the second thing. But also what I'm very concerned about, and I talked to our auditors about this, you gotta tell us now what happened to the children who never received a device or who didn't have a device for 6 to 8 months. If you're in 3rd grade, they're gonna test the hell out of you in 4th grade? Is that right? But is that right? If you have kids that on top of social and emotional issues, what's going to happen to them with the learning loss? We need to go child by child. Now, we couldn't do that in our audit, but I'm calling on the DOE and the mayor to be very mindful that these children may have lost a year's worth of learning, or 6 months, or 4 months. It's critical to their development. I tried to picture my own 9-year-old or 8-year-old, because they struggle in different subjects. What would happen if they never had an iPad and they just missed a whole year? I think their lives would be permanently held back. And that's a parent with privilege talking. And we have a lot of parents who are going to need a lot of resources because this didn't happen. And I think that's the takeaway here. And that is why we have to hold DOE accountable to this. And that's why we're out here today. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So this is all assuming that we go to school in person. We don't know yet if there's remote education. Does this issue still matter come September if fully remote is not an option?
Look, I think that it does. You know, we talked about this. We have to conquer the remote learning aspect because prospectively, we just never know what's coming our way in our city. And we don't know what's changing on a dime. And one of the things that we saw in my travels around the city was the lack of certainty the parents had. So it's not enough just to take that iPad and throw it in the closet, right? And keep the kids away from Minecraft or whatever right? We have to talk about that. That's a whole other audit. But But we have to resolve the tale of two connectivity issues in the city. So I think this is going to be very relevant no matter what happens in September. All right, everybody. Thank you all for coming. If I don't see you, have a wonderful August.